right, hello. So we have saved the best for last, and to bring us home for our last breakout session of Summit is Paul and Vidhu, and they'll be talking about practical tips and best practices on how you can bring more agility into ITSM. And so these are two Atlassian speakers. So Paul Buffington is a solutions engineer at Atlassian focused on ITSM. And before working in tech, Paul used to fly around in a US Coast Guard helicopter on search and rescue missions. And so these days when he's not talking to customers about ITSM, he spends his time traveling with his wife and golden retrievers who are Instagram famous. So check them out at Golden Jays. They have over 5,000 followers. Vidhu is a product manager here at Atlassian, and he's a hero in his own right. And he actually has a superpower, which is falling asleep anywhere at any time.
Not on stage.
And he also spends his time brewing herbal and spiced gin. And he comes from a family of doctors and is trained to read blood pressure charts using the sphygmanometer?
The sphygmanometer.
Okay,
yeah.
There you go.
That's the one with the pump that puts the pressure. So.
Yeah. Learning something new every day. All right, so let's give a warm welcome to Paul and Vidhu.
Thank you, Teresa. Hey, everyone. It's good to be back at this Vegas edition of the Summit. I hope the last couple of days have been inspiring, fun, and engaging. You might have got an opportunity to meet with peers, industry experts, Atlassians, and obviously each other. So what happens in Vegas this time should not stay in Vegas. You take the learnings, you take the fun, and share it back with your teams. In today's talk, we'd like to have a conversation regarding Agile ITSM, the practices, the thinking that goes and makes high-velocity teams successful. So I'm Vidhu. I will be leading you through the first few slides of this presentation, and then I'll call upon Paul Buffington, my esteemed colleague, principal solutions engineer. This works. So we live in exciting times. We live in a service-first mindset. We're all familiar with the digital transformation stories of organizations like VMware, Airbnb, even traditional businesses like Domino's. You used to go around the corner and grab a slice of pizza, but now you can just hail or call for the delivery at home. So what's happening? The digital services that are key to customers are now being transformed in ways that were never imagined before. So you as an IT team, an individual, a decision maker, are driving that change. So IT is no longer a cost center, and it's now transforming into an innovation center driving businesses. So what are the challenges facing these teams today? So if you think in the context of ITSM, you have many teams. You have a business team, you may have software teams, you have infrastructure and IT teams, you have different set of practices like Agile at scale, DevOps, maybe you have an ideal V3 implementation. So all these teams are integrated in ways that were not thought through before. So this is the heart of the digital transformation narrative. Teams are coming closer together to deliver meaningful work and unleashing the potential of teams and organizations. The key here is companies are looking to increase their development speed by improving the flow with DevOps practices and delivering value. So it's no longer about the number of activities your teams or your agents do. It's about what is the value they provide, what is the value that is being produced in doing these activities. Now, the previous century was all about planning. It was all about forecasting. It was all about preparing for the unwanted. This is changing. The 21st century is not predictable. And as Jeff Eggers puts it, you have to be prepared for the unprepared. And Paul has some great examples in his sections later, which talks about preparing and being more adaptable. Now, at Atlassian, we research teams. We believe that to unleash the potential of every team, we need to understand what is teamwork made up of. Is it people? Yes. Practice? Definitely tools. So what element of this is key and when it's most important, one versus the other? So many times our conversations focus around the tools and the processes. And then we unintentionally ignore the culture and the people aspect of it. Because, hey, we implemented a new tool, it doesn't work for us. Maybe the tool implementation was the thing that was not required. You might need it to have a cultural change or a mind shift change. So these are some elements that are very important. So when you look at performance, it's all about the value versus activity. In previous times, we used to measure the activities done, the throughputs, the ticket consumed, the ticket resolved. But now it's all about value. It's about the value your customers should be getting by all these activities happening in the back end. Culture. So what are the guiding principles of your team? And most importantly, do your teams promote cooperation, collaboration? Is there a healthy tension in your teams that keep each other honest and vulnerable at the same time? And at Atlassian, we truly believe investing in teams helps unleash their potential. If you think about practices, the focus has shifted from modules to practices. Now, you no longer say, hey, let's just install a change management module or an incident management module, and your incidents would get resolved faster. That's not how it works. You need to have a practice, a thinking, a structured way around how you would practice in case an incident comes in. And what practice matters the most? Well, you can choose multiple practices that you have today in your organization, but you need to prioritize the ones that will actually make a difference and improve it. And what practice needs attention? So all practices are not made equal. Some practices have higher weightage over the others based on the organizations you operate in. So what practices would you want to put your focus on and improve it? And we have some really practical tips today to talk you through quite of those. And if you find some good nuggets, along the way, take it with you. Open. So most of the world today operates unintentionally in closed ways. So when that happens, opinions are kept on the table. People don't interact that freely. The net result is people are burnt out. Knowledge is lost. Innovation is stifled at best. So when we think about open, we think about the open way of working, open way of business, and open way of being. And in the next two slides, I'll share a quick glimpse of what are open versus closed behaviors. So when you're a closed team, you're holding on information. There's office politics. People are burning out. People don't collaborate with each other. Now, I'm not saying all of these happen to your teams, but unintentionally, some of these patterns can be observed with teams that are not performing well. On the other side, with open, you no longer have to worry about knowledge loss. You don't have to worry about the tension between teams. There is no office politics. And if there is some politics, it's probably the government politics at best, not the politics in DevOps. So information is freely shared. There are no silos. Teams members interact with each other, and opinions from diverse personalities is all welcome. Now, this is inspirational. Trust me, being open is not easy. It requires a mind shift from everyone in the organization. And at Atlassian, we've published a few playbooks that can help you start embracing this open mindset. So speaking of playbooks, we have a lot of playbooks on the marketplace, on the Atlassian website today that you can download for different things like project health monitors, running it for a project, running health monitors for your teams, incident playbooks, and most recently we announced a few more IT-specific focused playbooks that you can download and start practicing with your teams today. And team plays. So everything doesn't have to be a health monitor. Everything doesn't have to be diagnostic. Things should also be fun. So with team plays, you can organize different ways by which your teams can understand more about their customers, interact with different cross-functional teams, and unleash their potential. So what's the ITSM of tomorrow? Before we go down the paths, so the ITSM of yesterday was more siloed, more modular. The ITSM of the future is more adaptable. They were structured and processes in the past, but now people are adopting lean and agile ways of working. You had more centralized teams, and they were not empowered, but now the teams are decentralized and they have autonomy within themselves. Previously, you used to have modules that were custom written, custom scripted. Now it's mostly low-code, no-code kind of generation we're in. And obviously, one size does not fit all. That's why even in hardware, for example, a phone, you have a marketplace to download apps. So you have marketplace apps that can fulfill your needs in the future. We're at the brink of the next industrial revolution. Sorry. So we didn't imagine that there would be self-driving cars. We wouldn't have imagined there's machine learning and AI, but it's come to us faster than we could have ever thought. So what's changing is, while the concepts of ITIL 3 were still valid, but the tools and practices was designed almost a decade ago. It doesn't hold true anymore. That's why ITIL 4 is now into practice. Now, I have Paul with me to join me for a quick conversation. So Paul, what do you think about ITIL 4?
Thanks, Vidhu. It's actually pretty exciting. We got a hold of this back in October and started looking at it, and we've been working this way. And ITIL 4 shifts from more of a, this is my service I'm delivering, I'm focused, to be value-centric focused. It also embraces the cultural aspect. What are the values for a team to rally around? And then finally looking at the practice and the way that teams work. It's not just within one team, it may very well reach across multiple teams. And so I think that's so key. As we looked at this, we saw so many IT teams that are using Atlassian and using Atlassian products. We're already in this area. And so we've delved into this, and some of the tips we're going to kind of talk about fall in line with this. And then we've got a special thing that you can kind of take away with you and learn more about it at the end of this session.
All right, Paul, so lead us through.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to weave some of this in, and it's well worth a look, because a lot of people say ITIL 3 or ITIL is dead, and that debate went on for quite a while out there. And I've seen the great value of what ITIL can bring, but it tend to be heavy in what they've implemented. And this new one, I think, is going to reinvigorate the way that we look at delivery of IT support, IT service. And so I want to bring some of this in and weave this in. And my goal in this remaining time before we wrap up today is to give you some practical ideas that you can take back to your teams, ask them about, think about, and experiment with, because it is about learning. One of the key things with ITIL 4 is continuous improvement. Now, when Atlassian thinks about IT, one of the things I really appreciate, I spent 13 years in the ITSM industry. It was really more about the technology and then the people come to the work. Here it is team-centric. We are about teams. That how's the team going to work and perform this function, whether it's front-end support to back-end. And so we're very team-centric in the way that we approach this with Jira Service Desk and the other products around it, allowing you to create that type of environment that's most optimized, whether it's an engineering team that's supporting an application system or the frontline workplace that's supporting your end users. The other part of that is customer centricity, really understanding who is the customer we're supporting and being able to learn and make improvements. I think that's so key. It's not just I'm there to process tickets. I'm learning and making and satisfying and bringing delight to my customers because we're able to deliver that level of support. And I've heard so many great examples from customers. The other thing with ITIL 4, and we've already seen this with Atlassian, is embracing Agile and DevOps practices. And so I'm going to show you a few of these things as we go through, especially in the infrastructure change aspect. And then the part of just collaboration and trust. It's very much at the core and the heart of what we do, as Vidhu was talking about, an open way of working. I think that's an important aspect. Now, for sake of time, I could spend a couple hours on this. I know you don't want to stay here. I want to move on to Bash and ship it. But I do want to focus on the ones that are probably most important to your team. And that is end user support and service request, which is your service desk, incident response, and then finally, infrastructure change, or what we now call change control. And I'll talk about and highlight some of the products. These come from customer stories. One of my favorite things about my role is I get to talk to customers and learn from them every week. We're going through and understanding their journey and guiding them through it. And so I'm going to bring some of those in. So let's get started with self-service and supporting the business. Self-service isn't right, and I've been in the receiving end of this, that I send off a ticket, the email goes out, and I hope someone has it and someone's going to respond. And if it isn't right, if it doesn't deliver that level of support that your end user have or the way that they want to interact, I want to walk up and talk to someone, or I want to send an email, or I want to chat with them. It leaves IT in a bad position. And so that's one of the key things in this. And one of the things that we've noticed and we've measured and watched is a term called shift left. Now, it may be a bit of a buzzword in some ways, and some really are focused on, great, we'll shift further to the left to get the answers or deliver the support faster, and I'll reduce my cost. Because the deeper I go into my support organization, it's going to cost me more. But there's another side of this we're missing out on, and that is I have an increased focus on that customer I'm serving. Not just frontline, downstream of that because they're just as important in delivering support. And then there's also this increased agility in the way that we're going to change the support. So this ticket came in, and I'm going to say, well, we could add some automation here to take care of this step and deliver it faster. And that might come from the lower level teams. So we're learning from one another and looking at this. And so there's that learning from top to bottom that's going on in the support organization. So shift left is a very real approach that we're seeing. And we're seeing it as customers are putting Jira Service Desk in place to take this life cycle of tickets, delivering answers faster to end users, but also looking at what can we automate? What can we take in here that if someone submits it is going to go ahead and take them through and either fulfill the ticket or get them to the right place. And so I think these are important stages in all of this. And that's what we've seen with Jira Service Desk, is being able to quickly deploy a request catalog. Out of all the tools that I've deployed in the past, and I've worked on a lot of them, I love this one for how quickly, not a central admin, but a team can get their request catalog up and running. So that not just for IT, non-IT, we watch Service Desk scale very quickly in being able to do this. That's a part of that, being responsive to the customer. And so 3 of the areas that come up oftentimes is that customer focus. Do I understand my customers I'm supporting? And am I looking at our, multi-channel? Do we have a strategy for that to deploy that out? I was talking to a customer today about how they're bringing chat ops in and weaving it into the different ways. They have chat channels, they are reducing their email inbound, but the portal still plays an important role. So I think that's an important aspect. Knowledge-centric, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about some things that we've learned there. As a part of that shift left, it's delivering greater value, but I need a strategy to make sure that my teams and my culture of my teams embrace that approach. And then finally, how do I streamline? I'm going to share with you an example of how we can not only use automation, but a team tactic called Level Z support to deliver support faster and more efficiently. But let's start with knowledge, aggregating knowledge. IT teams love Confluence. I had a customer meeting not too long ago. That was the product they started with. They had another older legacy tool, but they really liked Confluence. They'd centralized their knowledge. They were collaborating in internal meetings. They had their internal KB articles that they were using to solve tickets. And so it's really key to that. How can I aggregate that knowledge and bring it in a way that becomes a part of the community knowledge? So that way, if they move on to another team or organization, I have that available to me. So here's 3 key things that we've observed in just working with customers. First, it's investment. I'm going to invest in that culture and practices from the capability within Confluence. One customer I noticed just recently, and they were sharing with me, they wanted a little more governance. They like the open capability, but they're using an app from the marketplace that they have now in a review, and they know when the articles should be end of life. So you have that adaptability. So what is it that you need to invest in here with Confluence, the way the teams are structured and work in there? And then are there any apps from the marketplace you would bring in that would complement that? But that's just not it. You can't just bring the product and the tool to them. You need to, what is it in there for them? If I'm a tier 1, tier 2 support person, why should I take the time to contribute here? And I think the part of this is the peer reviews and rewards. One customer I know uses a Kudo program where they're recognizing who's publishing the best knowledge articles out there on their team, and they're looking that over time. So there's that incentive to be, recognized by your peers or rewards. So they're building it into their culture in the way that they share. And the interesting thing is, once they get started, it's like this wildfire just kind of takes off, and they realize, wow, this is great. Why didn't we, get to this place sooner? The other part is just learning and improving. Build it into your review cycles. Being able to that, quarterly meeting or monthly meeting is where are we at? What's going on in different initiatives? Reviewing what's been published. What different teams are doing with knowledge, because it'll spread out into different parts of IT and maybe even into business teams that they're working with. So find areas where we can learn and improve. Become curious, take your curiosity and apply it to what is it that we need for both an internal team to work better, but also what do our customers need for FAQs, knowledge articles, and that. Now, I could spend a lot more on this. We've written quite a bit in some different white papers on that. I want to get to the next one that we see quite a bit, and that's Level Z support. Gartner identified this trend in their 2020 report of ITSM, and I really like this report because they're looking at where are we going in some of the trends. And what the interesting thing is, we found that customers are already they're already there with Jira, and I'll explain why in a minute. But what this is because of cloud today and the way that our systems are loosely coupled, they're noticing a behavior in the way that we work because of chat, we're loosely coupled in the way that we'll interact with people instead of this, hierarchy. So the days of this right here where I've got this urgent ticket that's come in and I'm frontline support, I'm buried in tickets, so what is my first reaction? I'm looking for that bailout button. I want to hit that escalate button as quickly as possible. And I've met IT teams like that where they're buried in tickets. And so there isn't that really way of getting out. Now there are times we need to escalate, but there's a better way of doing it. And so what we've found with customers, they're taking this approach that they have, whether, I'll talk about how you do it in a minute, but they are able to understand what's the issue and the type. There's an SLA running, what's my first time to response. So if it's a frontline, they know, I have the next hour, or whatever it is, the type of ticket, I have this window of time to figure out and respond. And then they can have the ability to go to a level 1 swarm team. That's an urgent issue. I've got to get to the right team. That team is available, and I can get to them and get the answer to where I don't have to escalate it. I'm relying on that community knowledge. Or I can go to a more local swarming team that maybe it's a lower level. Now, how we're seeing customers do this, they're using queue-based escalation. We see that's a lot in service desk, where they bring attention to a certain queue with a certain type of ticket, with a notification, an app mention. And this is an area that Atlassian and the product team is very interested in around how can we further accelerate this. But the other way is chat ops, being able to just bring the right chat channel in there. One customer in Europe I was talking to, this allows that level 1 support person to know, okay, here's my channels, I'm going to go in there and find the experts that are available wherever they are. This was a global customer. And that's great because now they don't have to escalate, they can solve it faster. Happier customer, faster resolution time. But here's the other part that was really interesting. Expanded team learning. That level 1 support engineer, they now know more about this issue. They're more engaged, they're more interested. And so this is a key aspect of not only helping get to the answers faster and solve it, but help them learn. You're now floating the overall boat of all teams there, that my knowledge is increased, I'm better to support. Maybe I can answer that the next time around. So this is an interesting concept within support that we're seeing, that we're getting to that balanced work. The idea that this box on the frontline support is so big and it's flooded with tickets, and the idea typically is, I got a bigger box, I need more people. No, you don't need a bigger box, you need to shrink it. One customer I know of right now, they use an automation rule in Jira Service Desk that if no one has responded to a ticket, a customer, they send a nice email, they send it once, and if they haven't heard it in a couple hours after that, they'll auto-close the ticket. What they found was some of these people went on vacation, they're not paying attention, they found the answer elsewhere, they shrunk the box to the tickets that they really needed to pay attention to. So those are just little things that we see in there that we're able to get that balance of work. Open collaboration, from app mentions in Jira, integrating my chat, different ways that we can bring collaboration in, or Confluence, being able to get around the information that's important that we're working on. And I think the last part that's often forgotten, especially level 1 support, bring that culture of learning and improving into the team and make it a part of the way they work. All right, sake of time, I'm going to move on. There's quite a few more I would love to talk about, but let's get to IT operations and incidents and outages. So what's it all about when there's a Sev1 outage? It's moving across that timeline as quickly as possible. Being able to get to that recovery so that service is back on and we're not impacting the customers. And so a lot of these key elements in here that we want to talk about and consider get to team collaboration, and the practice reaches across multiple teams in this case. Maybe very well be reaching into the development team. That's one great thing of ITIL4 is acknowledging. And then finally, the last part I'm going to talk about, the learning and improving. That's the part that's often forgotten by teams. So one of the things that we talk about here is, especially IT operations, is it's not just about the technology, it's about the way they work. And I often ask teams, can you share your incident playbook? And some will actually have one. Some will think it's in a Word doc somewhere, and I think I can find it. But what we really encourage, and this just comes from Atlassian itself, and I've seen this with other IT operations teams I've worked with, is to get this into a documented place like Confluence that's reviewed, shareable, visible to other teams. I now know what qualifies as a major incident. I know what my practices are. I know how I'm going to communicate. We support 20 plus different critical business services. How are we going to communicate for all of them? We can have plans for all of them. How are the best teams and resources allocated? And then the last part, which I'll spend a lot of time focused on, how are we doing our post-incident reviews, the post-mortems? Are we conducting these for all major incidents? Are we publishing them and sharing the learnings? And then finally, the last one, which is my favorite from being former Coast Guard aviation, running drills. I spent many hours in the back of a helicopter flying around practicing, because when you get out there for a rescue, you don't know exactly what you're going to find. And it's the same way with, I talk to IT operations teams. One recently I was talking about, they don't even have to run it in the system. They just have cards. They'll be sitting around for their weekly meetings, saying, oh, here's an incident. This card, what are you going to do? What are we going to do? And how do we go through it? And they talk through that major incident. And some actually induce incidents into their production systems. And so I think that's an important aspect that we need to consider. So as far as being flooded with incidents on the detect and respond, one of the great things of having OpsGenie in our portfolio now is we're able to get ahead of that. And it's like having Jira in your toolbox of resources for an incident response team. You have that level of adaptability. I can learn what alerts I have today and adapt as new ones come online with new applications. It also provides an incident response center where I can come in as a team. But I think the key thing here is it fits the mold of I'm always learning, I'm always adapting, because that's what's coming at me all the time. I love that sound, helicopter flying over. The other thing is knowledge. This is the other part. When I am showing customers, I do a lot of demos for customers, and we get to this part where their run book is not in a Word doc, it's not in an Excel spreadsheet, it's inside of a Confluence space, and it's reviewed, and they can highlight it. Internally at Atlassian, but many customers I've worked with, their frontline SRE engineer or IT ops person responding typically has the fastest resolution on it. They found a 30-40% improvement just because it's all there in one place, and it's reviewed. I know it's current. I know who owns it. So this is really a practice that we're seeing that is combining both the technology with the practice to make the team more effective. So I'm gonna fast forward. There's a lot to do in incident. I want to get to the other one I think it's most valuable to take back to your teams, and that's post-incident reviews. What's fascinating is Google found 70% of postmortems are forgotten. Why is that? Most of the time it's documented in a tool. I hope someone runs the report. I'm moving on to my next thing I got to work on. So we advocate for taking your post-incident reviews and putting them in a place that's collaborative, that's visible, that shares the learning. We also advocate for, and it's a part of our the playbook that one of the plays in the Atlassian playbook, blameless postmortems. I'm not there to point fingers at someone else. I'm there to learn and share the learning. And so here's an example that it comes from both our internal, but I've seen this in many customer sites where they know what the fault is, they understand the impact. This becomes a collaborative document that is now visible to my leaders of other teams. I know one customer, they take their PIRs of their tickets, of their tracking the PIR and the results, they're putting them in dashboards that their executives can see. That's a value that an IT operations team is shipping back to the business, saying, here's where we're improving, and here's some of our PIRs that we're not able to get to the root cause. So, incident and problem were always a separate practice in the past. We're starting to see that blending where these practices are starting to come together and deliver greater value. The days of my backlog of my problem being 500 plus, I want to clear that backlog and get to this type of learning and unlock it, because that is continuous improvement. So what are the tips here? Establish a culture where learning is a part of it. It's, that blame game is not the important thing. It's about, you made a mistake with the DNS or dropping that database table, great. What do we do to, prevent this in the future? Accidents happen, and so we want to learn. And also we want something repeatable. That's why putting it in Confluence, so as new team members come on, or I'm going to share this with another application team that's not following this. We're going to share the learning across teams, so I want it documented. It's also improving all the time, so we're going to continue in that. It's also sharing the knowledge, whether it's knowledge articles, known errors, run books, improvements that we're going to be putting back in our products. So we're going to take actions out of this of bugs and changes, and that's the great thing of the Atlassian approach from a technology standpoint. And then finally, we're going to publish our learnings. We're going to share with whether our internal or even our outside customers, we're going to share what it is. Then increasing the visibility is a part of the value that we're giving back to the business. So just in summarizing, fast MTTR is possible. It's about getting that practice and the flow of that work and how the teams work, especially when they're cross-functional, and connecting the dots there is so critical. One thing I did not get time to, but it's so important, that is effective communications. How can you communicate effectively during an outage, make it easy for the IT operations team, and make sure that's a high availability communication, especially when it's an external customers that are using your services. Open team collaboration we've talked about, and then finally the PIRs of continuous improvement in those practices. All right, last one for you here, and that is infrastructure change management, which is now in the ITIL world of version 4 is called change control. And I'll explain why that's evolved in this direction. You know, a lot of us would probably recognize this stack on here that we've managed probably less than 5 years ago, maybe a little more than that. But those days are gone, where I had to manage the entire stack, so I had to have a very stringent control. If you touch that physical layer, you know, I want to make sure that you're not going to disrupt that critical service that's running on that stack. Where we're at today is right around this area where at least that ISAS or maybe even past, we have the platform there, and I'm just managing the applications. But probably we're even closer to that right there, that I'm managing that application platform. It's really the code. So we are on a very quick path towards IT is going to be managing infrastructure as code. We're going to be pushing more configurations. No one's really touched anything, and so we're moving towards this release and deployment path. Here's the great news of ITIL 4. It embraces this from the development world. It has something to say about it, and we'll have even more to say as the detailed publications start to come online in 2019. But what do we do today? How do I bridge my world of change management to this new world of change control? And why would I want to do that? Well, first of all, this is probably your normal world where change management is in place, one, to prevent outages and reduce, risk from compliance issue, challenges there. And so it's a very, very important process. It also plays a role in security. So, how normal change and a standard change flow through this process is very different. And in most organizations, there's a lot of pain and bottlenecks in this process. And what it needs to do, it needs to evolve to a practice, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So some of the areas where we see is it's difficult to raise a change with IT. How in the world, I send them an email, do I go to this tool, and what do I fill out? And so it's very difficult to interface with them. One of the things I've seen from our side is customers are using the JSD portal to be able to allow the business to raise a change request to initiate it, and even internal IT, and we'll talk about some examples of that in a minute. The other thing that's really just difficult is if it's an important change, it has a little more complexity, what we would call a normal change that requires further review, it's difficult to collaborate as a team. It's because it's probably in a Word doc, it's in an Excel spreadsheet, and we've got to pass that around. It's in my other tool, and I hope someone looked at it. So collaboration and planning is really difficult. Change approval boards is the other part of it. They can be very heavy. They don't know about what's going on, so they're asking a lot of questions, and so that's another challenge. And then finally, there's just this lack of automation. Standard changes should be automated and flow through there. They're these ones that are repeatable, that have been proven to be successful. There's no reason why they should not be on rails to move through quicker. And then I'm not learning from it, and that kind of goes back to the PIR. So let me get to automation. Automation is such a key part of this, and we have automation in Service Desk, and I was really pleased to find out when I was in Europe just a few months ago, it was actually last September, there was a major organization that took that step right there. They were going through a digital transformation. This is a government agency that delivers benefits to the entire country. And the new CIO came in, CTO, and they did a digital transformation of everything because software is so critical. They wanted to deliver good service to their fellow country people, and so they went on that journey. Well, IT now had to play catch up. Our tools don't fit, we're not on that journey. So they went through that themselves, and they left their traditional ITSM tool and they moved into Jira Service Desk because they had software teams working in Jira software. Well, they looked at their change backlog, and it was very, very large. And what they did with Jira Service Desk and automation, they took their standard changes and they said, these are repeatable, these are known to be safe, we have good documentation, let's put those on an automated path. They automated 70% of their change requests in there for their standard changes. And that allowed them then to focus on that remaining 30%. And even in there, they started breaking that work down into smaller units of work. And they're well on their path to where they're probably going to do more release and deployment than they are change control. Change control is just the governance piece. So that's really just a key, really small example that I am seeing repeated over and over in the Atlassian ecosystem, especially with Jira Service Desk. The other one is on planning. I do have what I would consider an IT project. It's considered a larger change. I have oversight and approvals that needs to happen. And so what we're seeing here are customers coming in and taking what was outside and bringing it into a collaborative document. This one customer has security in there. They have all of their comments from them. And what they found was their change approval boards that usually had everyone getting on a video bridge or a conference call. and okay, it's your turn to tell me about the change. They're reading this before they go in. They understand exactly what's happening here, or at least a better informed. It becomes a virtual cab. So they've moved to peer reviews early on, and they're pushing the approvals out into the business. So when it comes to a cab, it's a simple, I understand, yes, we're ready to go, it's fully documented. And the other thing is this document becomes a living document that carries forward and very important in the process. So I have a lot more I could say about that, but I want to just get to wrap up change. I can hand back to Vidhu. I think the key thing with change management, which is now really a change control, is really outside-in thinking. Can I bring in security and compliance and service owners? That's going to streamline this practice. Can I centralize my documentation and increase the visibility, the collaboration, and learning? And then finally, I'm going to implement RFC peer reviews to where my change approval board maybe becomes a thing of the past. I really don't need that centralized ability. I can push this approval out in the business and still have my audit record, still feel safe that we are able to move forward with that. And then finally, just being able to bring automation here, the example you see. And the other one we notice a lot is a lot of either Trello for boards of change to provide visibility. A couple customers doing that, or just using regular Jira boards to understand the flow of work. So those are the areas. Really, it's about increasing change at the speed of the business and bringing automation into that, streamlining your approvals. We're reducing the risk by breaking the amount of work down, moving this over to the code side so we can have, as a part of our deployment and release. And then finally, continuous improvement, which I really don't get time to get into. Everything we talked about, the PIR, for every type of major change, I'm going to apply that same kind of principle. It's about the learning. Where can we improve? Because that will probably unlock other automations that you would want to do in your change process. So I'll go ahead and invite Vidhu back up, and he'll wrap us up here.
Thank you, Paul. Oh, skip the slide. Yes. Cool. So I think we talked about practical tips and tricks to have Agile ITSM work for you, and working with high-velocity teams. So it's all about ITSM software being adaptable to your needs. And for things that are not available out of the box, you have plugins that are specialized to take care of those niche demands. We have more than 1,000 plugins, add-ons in the marketplace apps that serve your IT team needs. So just to bring it back home, we've shared some best practices. We've talked about practice, performance, and culture, and we touched upon the different products that can come together and deliver an Agile ITSM practice. So with that, I think what we need to focus on is it's not just the tools and the processes, but it's the people and culture which is important. And tying that into a concept, we've written this white paper. Paul, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I think one thing, if I could give you to take away back to your teams to really consider, we looked at the ITIL 4, we looked at what do high-velocity teams actually practice. From what we've observed, ITIL 4 acknowledges that, embraces it. And so we've written our insights in the way, we partnered with Axelos on that. Akshay is actually here at the conference. He's from Axelos, is one of the authors of the ITIL 4. We really like this approach, and it fits very well with what we're seeing with other customers. So I'd encourage you to download it, take it back, share it with your teams, talk about it, how can you bring these types of practices into your organization?
And Paul, how many pages is this?
It's just like 20 pages.
It's not a 200-page document?
No, it is not.
Right,
yeah, so you won't read it on the flight home. So
okay.
Yeah, we won't put you to sleep. But I think it's worth the look at it because it's, I think, a better way of working in the Agile DevOps world that we're moving very quickly to for IT.
All right. Thank you. We'll open for questions.
Yeah. Do we have any questions before we wrap up here? Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Teresa.
Thank you for the talk. I'm actually have two questions. First of all, being a service-oriented kind of a team, besides trying to figure out how to best service your customers, you want to have their say too. So is there like a standard mechanisms that Atlassian provides to do customer surveys or some other tools?
Yeah, it's a good point you bring up about including the customer in their feedback. CSAT's one, but there's a new metric out there that Atlassian and the product team have been talking about. We're very interested. It's called CX. So it takes into account what's their feedback and feeling about this, and also maybe other things they might submit to me, but also what's the experience of what we've delivered on support, and does it deliver up? So I'm glad you asked that question because I think that's a key aspect. Right now, what we have available, I see a lot of customers using CSAT, And then there are some other marketplace apps if you want to get more in depth in the surveys.
And the second
Yes,
part
please.
is you showed very nice documents about post-incident reviews and change management or
Yes.
change control documents in Confluence. Is there a template?
Yes, good question. So I believe our Confluence team has shipped the ones for marketing. So they're working on that. I am cheering very loudly for IT. So at some point, I'm hoping they would get in there. Otherwise, what I've been working with teams is I'm just recreating the ones that my teams are currently using. You can import the Word doc. That's why I love Confluence. I have a starting point. But that is something that we're very aware of, more templates for different types of teams.
Thank you.
Good question. Thank you. Looks like any other questions? Okay.
You all ready for the bash?
Yes. Yeah, it's been hopefully a really good summit. Hopefully this session was valuable too. Thank you for taking the time to join us. If you have any other questions, come up and see us afterwards and enjoy Bash.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the bash.
Yes.